a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance.
Okay, everybody, it's so wonderful to go right from Melanie to an incredible panel of absolutely fascinating women. I am so honored to introduce you to the following. First up, Shelly Kapoor Collins. Shelly is a serial entrepreneur turned VC. She founded the Shatter Fund in 2017 to exclusively invest in high potential disruptive technology companies led by female entrepreneurs, especially in e-commerce, including health tech, fintech, and more. Shelly was appointed by the National Women's Business Council by the Obama administration, and she served on the Women in Public Service Project, I want to get that right, started by then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton while at the State Department. She also served as national co-chair for technology for Barack Obama's campaign, along with some big names like Mark Benioff and Reed Hastings. And in May this year, Governor Newsom enlisted Shelly to join the California Governor's Office of Economic Development Entrepreneurship Task Force. And this month, Shelly also joined Franklin Templeton as a venture partner. So she's busy. Next up, another incredibly busy and super smart woman, Michele Colucci. Michele is the co-founder and managing partner of DigitalDx Ventures in Silicon Valley. She is a venture capital thought leader, a lawyer, investor, serial entrepreneur, and philanthropist. She has authored 5 patents in technology and founded companies in the legal, technology, retail, and entertainment spaces. Her extensive operating experience in highly regulated verticals has focused on issues from management to legal. As a venture capitalist focused on med tech, Colucci is committed to impacting the health field by investing in companies that enable doctors to make better diagnostic decisions through the application of AI and big data. She is a member of the board of directors of public and private firms, including the Global Indemnity Group, Nefrosent, Optina Diagnostics, Prime Genomics, and Trait. She has been a frequent guest lecturer at Stanford University School of Engineering. And in 2017, Colucci was named West Coast Ambassador to the Nobel Laureate Foundation. She earned her BA and JD from Georgetown University and a Master in Fine Arts from the American Film Institute. Next up, the amazing Julie Castro Abrams. I don't even know how Julie's awake right now. She's been doing conferences all week long. Michele and I were on one with her this morning at 8 o'clock. Julie is the general partner of How Women Invest, a new venture fund deeply rooted in the mission to disrupt antiquated and unequal landscape impacting women. She is also the chair and CEO of How Women Lead, a network of over 10,000 powerhouse women dedicated to promoting diverse women's voices and propelling women's leadership forward. She's an expert in board governance and building diverse boards to make a strategic advantage. She's also experienced in a number of other fields and a big investor for local startups. She sits on advisory boards of a fintech startup called Lend Donate and the New Search Collaborative, and is governance chair for the Women's Funding Network. So Julie never sleeps. That's just what you should get from that. Noosheen Hashemi, a dear friend of mine and one of the smartest ladies I know, is the founder and CEO of January.AI, a precision health company that uses AI and machine learning to prevent, predict, and postpone chronic disease through glycemic tracking and prediction, leading to personalized insights and recommendations. Noosheen launched her career at Oracle in 1985, developing and scaling operational infrastructure, and later became the Vice President of Finance and Administration. While at Oracle, she earned her MS in business at Stanford, not an easy thing to do. She went on to become VP of Sales and Marketing at Quote.com. And after leaving Quote.com, she served on multiple boards. She founded and remains the president of the Hand Foundation, a family foundation. And Noosheen also co-manages a family office with diverse investments in over 130 companies and venture capital funds. She's also an advisory board member at Stanford's Institute of Economic Policy Research and an advisory council member at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. And by her own admission yesterday, is 14 hours a day at January. I know that. And finally, Deepa Pakianathan, I should say Dr. Deepa Pakianathan. She's managing member at Delphi Ventures and CEO of Red Pharmaceuticals. She currently serves on the board of Calithera Biosciences, where she's the lead director, as well as Parafound Therapeutics, Mario Biopharma Group, Theravance Biopharma, and FSDC Corp. She serves as executive vice president and treasurer of the San Francisco Conservatory of Music's board. While she's been at Delphi, Deepa has funded 11 drugs that are on the market helping patients right now. 3 of them generate over $1 billion in revenue each year. Deepa is the sole biotech partner at Delphi, and over the last 2 decades has taken 7 portfolio companies public, and 8 portfolio companies have been acquired. Deepa joined Delphi in 2001. And prior to that, she was an M&A corporate finance banker at JP Morgan. And before that, a research analyst at Genesis Merchant Corporation. She is a postdoctoral scientist in the immunology department at Genentech Corporation from 93 to 97. She received her PhD and MS from Wake Forest University and her MSc and BSc from the University of Bombay. So ladies, thank you all for being here. I know you all so well. It is so fun to see you today, especially in this forum. We're so proud to be a part of HITLAB today. I want to just launch into it. And the whole idea about our conversation is women investing in women and why it's important. And Shelly, I'm going to start with you. You are considered a leader in the venture field. You really jumped into this idea of women investing in women early. And it was after founding your own companies and you made that leap from entrepreneur to VC, and especially to enable women to participate in the innovation economy. I want to hear about that decision. What took you from the entrepreneur to the venture role? Shelly, I think we need your mic, sorry. One more time, I don't think we can hear you.
Justin, can you unpin Shelly?
Now we've got you, I think.
Really? Okay, good.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. So first of all, Stefanie, thank you for having me here. I just think the world of you, and it's a real pleasure to be here with this amazing panel, by the way, that you just introduced. I feel like everyone should be getting an award. And so thank you for that. It's great company to be in. Back to, the decision to launch Shatter Fund and how it came to be. I can tell you that the decision consisted of 3 different things. It was about timing, it was about a call to action, and it was about results. So, I've been in tech for 20 years. You talked about Noosheen started at Oracle. I started my career at Oracle in 1998, and I was there for 10 years until 2008. In their consulting practice, I kind of bounced around the US implementing the back office solutions in their government sector, health education, GEH, government education and health sector. And I really got to cut my teeth on policy and tech and how it all kind of fits together. But when I started my first business, what I found was that during those 10 years, I was almost always, if not most of the time, one of a few women in the room, especially as a programmer, right? Started my career as a programmer. And so along the way, as I went on to start my first company, a consulting services company, because I believe strongly that if you're going to ask someone to pay you to do something, you have to have value. And the value has to be apparent to the customer. And what I knew was Oracle services and consulting. And so I started that. And again, I would always be, generally one of the few women in that practice or in the service. And along the way, I started to mentor women and I started to advise women. And people would say to me, you should start a fund. You've developed products, you've started a company, you should start a fund, and more than advice and mentorship, you should invest in women. But it didn't feel right? The timing didn't feel right. It didn't come together for me until I went into the Obama administration in 2013. As you mentioned, I was appointed to the President's Council for Women in Business. It was probably one of the most impactful roles that I've had the honor of having. I was there for 3 years in the second Obama administration, where we really cut into and dug into what are the most prohibitive factors for women to start businesses. Turns out that it's not just access to capital, it's actually lack of access to capital, lack of access to markets, and lack of access to networks. And it's not because, women, we don't belong in those rooms. It's because, there's a systemic issue here where men give to other men, they race from men, and they give to people that look like them. So when I came out of the administration in 2016, the timing felt right. And I really kind of sat down and put pen to paper and said, okay, the call to action is clearly cash investment. It's not just mentorship and advising, although that's critical. The timing is now. And the results aspect that I spoke about, it's that, by not investing in diverse founders, especially women, Morgan Stanley has, stated that we're leaving behind $4.3 trillion of value to the market. So that's number one, investor gains. And by the way, when a woman is involved in the decision-making process and in starting a company, the results are significantly higher than a non-diverse team. So a very long answer to your lovely question that there are 3 aspects that went into it. Call to action was cash investment. The timing was after the Obama administration, and the results were higher returns for investors who want to invest in female entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much, Shelly. Michele, I'm so happy to see you. Michele, too, I love we've got our little VC cohort here next to each other. You work in a very highly focused early diagnostic vertical, and you support a lot of female founders, but you're also really passionate about encouraging investors, not just to invest in the female founder, but the female funder. You really think that it's key that women invest in women fund managers. I would love for you to just expand on that a little bit.
Thank you, Stefanie, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. I've got a lot of wonderful women here that I know, which is awesome. Shelly through my sister, and Julie I've known, and everybody on the panel. So I'm excited to be here, and I definitely am really passionate about that question. And the reason is I'm a former entrepreneur as well, and I had a really hard time. I remember when I was presenting my my business to venture, because at the end of the day, I had comments like, you need to put your hair back and put glasses on and look like a guy, and because the idea is that there's a pattern recognition, right, amongst people who look like you do or act like you do, and unfortunately, with sort of this white male world, it's it's not that they're not lovely guys. It's just that they are comfortable investing in people who are like them, who go to the same place for their vacation and do their same thing. And as long as that stays in place, there's not going to be a place for women founders and women board members and women C-suite to grow. It's just not going to happen. So I feel very strongly it's a chain that we have to impact. We have to have the women investing first in a fund manager. And the reason why, I've had I've probably about a third of my way raised on the fund. And, I noticed when I did this survey from Wharton about women fund managers, one of the questions was how many women are investing in your fund? It made me think like, wow, you know what? Like not many. And then, I also further noticed, when I talk to women, they are like, what's the chance am I going to lose this? The guys are asking me how much money am I going to make, So I feel like there's a different approach that women take to investment, and it's it's conservative, which is right. And you should be focused on risk management and all that, but you should also be focused on some piece of that as being alpha, as some piece of that as being taking that step and investing in the woman manager, because at the end of the day, the woman manager is not going to fund just one founder, right? She's going to fund many founders. She's going to bring women on the board. She's going to bring women into the C-suite. She's going to bring, so personally, I've done that consistently. I write it into like one of my investments. I wrote it in. I said, you have to have one woman on the board and best efforts for a second. They tried to give me pushback, but I'm like, no, I'm sorry. That's not hard, right? There are so many amazing women out there that are so brilliant. They just don't have the network. And, us on the panel, Shelly, Julie, myself, all those who are raising funds, same thing. We just might not have the investor network because women don't. So we're trying to get women to get past that. If you really want to make the impact, you want to make one to many, right? Not sort of one-on-one. And frankly, from a risk perspective, you're diversifying your risk amongst a portfolio. And you're also not just helping one woman, but you're helping many. So I feel very strongly it's a chain, and it's got to start with where we vote with our money, with our dollars, right? We are also in healthcare, the majority of women were making the decisions. We also have the majority of wealth. How is it possible that there are only less than 3% of women who have started funds, who have been able to raise money? That's crazy. And that is because of that little piece right there that's holding us back on the rest of this chain. So I feel very strongly about it's the entire chain you want to change, and that's how you're going to see more women as founders, more women in the C-suite, and more women on boards.
So important to mention. Thank you. Okay, Noosheen, you bring the investor, the entrepreneur, the nonprofit board member lens to this discussion. Tell us why you believe it's so incredibly important to back not just female founders, but also underrepresented founders.
Definitely. First, I want to thank you, Stefanie. This is an unbelievable panel. I do know almost everyone on the panel. I just don't know Michele, but nice to see you all. Yes, so I think the issue of equity is really, really important, not just in pay, in opportunity, obviously for economic and career advancement, for personal fulfillment and happiness. So equity is really important. I work in the diabetes field, and we have a big equity issue there. 40% of people dying of COVID have diabetes, and many of the people don't even know they're at risk. So 22% of the 34 million people with diabetes are undiagnosed today, and 88% of the 84 million people with prediabetes are undiagnosed. That's 75 million people don't know they're going to get diabetes. And so lack of access to good nutrition, health education, access to healthcare is a matter of life and death, especially during dangerous global times. But the bigger issue than equity, I think, is diversity. So design thinking started in the 1950s, and over the last few decades, it's shown that the most creative and the most practical ideas come from diverse groups. Not any of us, and certainly no homogeneous group has the answers to the challenges we face. So be they in a company, be in a market, in a society, or the world at large. So we would simply be shortchanging ourselves if we don't invite all voices to the table. I think each person really brings their own unique perspective, and whether you're creating, solutions, products, causes, we have a greater chance of winning, succeeding, and having lasting impact if we really bring all of those cultivated, diverse voices in. And I've seen that with my own eyes. I've practiced it, design thinking, in nonprofits and in companies over the last 25 years. And let's say there wasn't that much design thinking at Oracle, Shelly. That's an inside joke, but in the next 25 years, certainly I've applied it everywhere. And diversity, design thinking doesn't work without diversity. It just doesn't work. So you can't come up with the best solutions. You're shortchanging yourself.
Thank you so much, Noosheen. Deepa, you serve on 4 different public boards right now, and that's pretty staggering. And we're still in this infancy, really, of women being on boards. We're getting better. We're making bigger moves to do it. But I'd love to hear from your point of view, what kind of advice can you give women? I mean, an awful lot of women on this call are founders, or they're in that early stage of entrepreneurship, and someday being on a board and being part of that sort of governance field is, in their future. What kind of advice can you give them?
First of all, Shelly, thank you so much for including me in this wonderful group of women. I only know Noosheen, and I so look forward to meeting all of the others of you. um, it's interesting. When I started joining boards, I was typically the only woman in the room and typically the youngest person in the room. So that's where I started. And I think we've made a huge amount of progress from 2 decades ago to where we are today. But what I would encourage all of you to think about is that you all have very powerful voices and opinions that will add very greatly to our governance of companies. And it's something that's in that you can't measure it, you can't define it, but every board that I'm on now that has multiple women on the board or people from different varied backgrounds, the discussion is much deeper, it's much more impactful, and it's much more inclusive. And so because when you make drugs, when you make a cancer therapy, you don't make it just for men, you make it for everybody who's got cancer. And understanding patients and making sure that clinical trials include both men and women in equal numbers, I think is going to be a really important thing that we're learning in the middle of this pandemic, because women and men have been impacted so differently. And I don't think the FDA completely has ground rules for that yet, but that's hopefully something that will come into play. But I want to encourage all entrepreneurs at some point to consider board seats, because not only will you contribute your voice, but you will also learn by interacting with a different group of people and bring you to a much better understanding of how your own board works. And I think it makes you a better entrepreneur and a better CEO if you have that external board experience, because then you realize you're not alone. There are lots of other people in the world who are going through exactly the same difficulties. I know your previous speaker mentioned having to come up with safety protocols for her company in the middle of the pandemic. And I know that a lot of biotech CEOs in the Bay Area banded together to make sure that they knew all the information and came up with consistent protocols for their employees to come back into the labs and do research. So I encourage you to never think that you're not qualified for a board, because a lot of women do think that. I think your experiences and your qualifications and your intelligence can add a lot to discussions at the board level. I would also point to the fact that networking is really important. So letting people know that you are interested in being on a board. There are also some really terrific programs. I know there's a program called Executive Women in Bio that actually solicits application for women who are at all levels of an organization to come in, and they do an intense training process where they teach you what it's like to be on a board, what you need to know, they demystify the process for you, and then help with networking post that little three-day course to help you network with the kinds of people, the recruiters, CEOs, et cetera, and the alumni from that course to join boards where you will be a good fit.
Thank you so much, Deepa. Great advice. And I know Julie was in the chat concurring. Julie, if you can turn on your mic, I just want to say to everybody, if there is a picture in the dictionary next to the word trailblazer, it's going to have Julie's picture right there. Julie, you've spent your career really amplifying the voices and elevating women, female founders, executives. And just this past year, you decided to sort of put your money where your mouth is, and you've also started a venture fund called How Women Lead. Why was the time right to launch it now?
Well, honestly, everybody has contributed to that story in this conversation already, in particular Michele, when she was talking about networks and she was talking about wealth. So I've wanted to do this for a long time. I ran a microenterprise microfinance organization, helped 6,000 women start their own companies, 10 years ago, a while back, but so many of these women who are ready to scale couldn't get funding, right? So I wanted to do it at some point. And I built this network of 13,000 women leaders, all very senior. We focus on things like the boardroom, Deepa. And as a result, here we have all these women with wealth, influence, and privilege. But the crazy thing is I started to dig into it and realized 30% of men, listen to me, everyone, who are accredited investors, you just have to make $200,000 a year for 2 years in a row, a couple other standards, but 30% of those men are investing in venture and only 5% of us are. We are leaving wealth, influence, power, board seats, all on the table. We are not playing in the game the way we should. And so I started putting two and two together. And last year we hit a record number of women achieving a certain level of wealth in this country. And so last year, this time I started talking to the women in my network and saying, hey, what if we thought about pulling something together, really educating people, giving them the confidence that they could play in the venture landscape? Because women seek self-efficacy. We need to have confidence. We know what we're doing before we move forward. So we created a structure. And what's so crazy, of course, then the pandemic happened. And all of a sudden what we found, we raised this fund in like 6 months, and which is kind of unheard of for a first fund. It was because of the network effect, but it was also Black Lives Matter and the pandemic. People were looking for something that they could be part of that was hopeful, that they could do together with other women that they trust. And over half of our investors are women of color, which is absolutely unheard of. And so all of that combined, I think this momentum of this year and our frustration makes people sort of open their minds to other possibilities. And so to me, it was the confluence of all of that and all the hard work these women have done to lay the groundwork, all the data they're talking about, they proved it over time. And so the truth is we should and will raise $1 billion, and it will be from women and women of color. So, that.
I love it. And just a quick follow-up, Julie. So here we go. I can't believe we've spent all 2020 in this crazy world. We're going into the next year. What are the top challenges you see sort of on the immediate horizon for female executives?
Well, if you're talking about women executives specifically, just one note, our numbers around venture were about 2.8% last year. We just got a report that's like 1.8%. So we're not going in the right direction in venture, so that's a problem. I think the biggest challenges for women is there is no way these kick-ass women who are on these boards and running companies can also be the teachers of their children. We have a crisis. McKinsey had a report that they released a couple of weeks ago that, as many as, 20 to 30% of women are thinking about stepping back in their careers because they can't physically do it. And which one of us are going to say that our career is more important than our children, right? Like nobody does that. So companies have got to figure out how to be responsive in this future of work space and create other alternatives. Like I'm old compared to a lot of you guys, and my kids have graduated from college and they have good jobs. But a couple of years ago, that first year out of college, nobody can find the right job. They should all be deployed helping our kids with their homework. Like there's so many solutions that if people got together and found the people who want to do something and have, the capacity to solve the problems that a lot of us are finding that women are having in the workplace. We've had these national programs before. Now with our new administration, maybe they'll do a works project where they get everybody building roads, but also how about education project and lifting and supporting all of these families up that are desperately needing support.
Thank you so much. Okay, ladies, we're getting a little close on time, but I do have a few more questions for you. And I'm going to start with Michele. And, it's so often said that you have to be smarter and more prepared to thrive in the venture world as a woman. How have you been able to differentiate yourself with DigitalDx and stand out from the crowd?
Yes. So I think that first of all, we focused on a vertical that we could really own because we get in early. We know what other funds that are large and well-known follow us. So really finding the niche and knowing our niche and having the sort of world experts in that niche and the advisors, Nobel laureates on our board, people that really understand the science, understand the AI, understand the marketing and the reimbursement regulatory. That's been the main focus of de-risking the early stage investments, because early stage investments are inherently risky. And if you really don't have that comprehensive team, then it's hard to be successful. Also, we focused on like, the top 2 areas that are going to accelerate over the next 5 to 10 years are AI and healthcare. And Accenture did a report, they said the area that AI was going to have the biggest impact on was healthcare. So you feel like, okay, I de-risk, I talk to my other fellows, I do about 30 fellows every quarter, and they're from all over the world. And I say, what's our goal here? What's our goal with the venture fund? De-risk, right? You want to take the risk down and increase the reward. So we focused very much on a de-risking strategy because, again, we want more women to invest in us. And if women feel more comfortable that we have managed the risk, so being in a vertical that's high growth, having a group of people who really know what they're doing. And then we actually went one step further and we said, okay, we'll make the investments. We've made 6 investments. You can kick the tires. Usually when you invest in a fund, you go, hey, we're great people, we're smart, invest in us, we're going to make great decisions. So to try and further de-risk that, we're like, hey, we're great people, we're smart investors, we'll make decisions. And by the way, we've already made great decisions. We've had 2 out of our 6 that have already marked up in the first year. We're giving our LPs the opportunity to invest at our cost. How much more can you do? And yet, it is still difficult to get an audience of people who will consider that. It's very surprising. I have male friends who, have a couple of their friends from business school. Oh, we're going to each chip in a few million. We're going to get you started. Like that just doesn't work when you don't come from that world. So, so it doesn't matter sometimes if you're better. You have to be 10 times better. You can't just be a little better, right? And I feel like the reason why the statistics for small funds, under $100 million funds, women-run funds, do better than everything, pretty much. If you look at all the statistics, they're outperforming everyone. I see Maria on the call. She has an amazing fund. Everyone. It's because we have to be. We have to be to get usually what's the male investor who doesn't look like us to convince them, to invest in us. And my goal is to hopefully get women who do look like us because they will understand the value and then they'll cross that divide. And we always talk about, crossing the chasm adoption when we talk about startups and mentality and so forth. And it's no different. Like it's no different. You're an entrepreneur when you're starting a venture fund as a woman-run venture fund because you have to get early adopters. You have to get massive adoption. And the only way to do that, one of the ways to do that, I should say, is either to be 10 times better or to get more people that look like you, that understand how you speak, what you say, understand your story, and see the value. So that's sort of how we've managed to sort of approach that piece.
Thank you. Shelly, I want to talk to you a little bit about a similar idea, but taking it into the COVID world. I know you've got several different companies in your portfolio, and a lot of them made some great pivots during the pandemic. One that comes to mind is Fitz Frames, which if all of you don't know, it's a 3D printing company that can make your glasses, but they pivoted in a big way for the pandemic. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And before I explain about them, I just want to give a little bit of background as well. I think what we were just talking about, Julie was saying, during the pandemic, at the onset of the pandemic, Shatter set out to do a survey of over 70 women-led and founded companies in the U.S. And the number one prohibitor of women being able to do their day jobs or run their companies was childcare. And like you said, be teachers to their kids at home. And so that was number one. Number two, over 95% of respondents said that all the responsibilities of household chores and their day jobs and the kids were falling to them. So I thought that was, and we expected that, right? So coming back to Fitz, if you look at, based on what I just said about the survey, and if you look at any prolonged crisis or major recession in the American history, you're going to find women that are stepping up. We're pushing for a solution. We're pushing for recovery. If you think about World War II with Rosa the Riveter, if you think about right after the Great Recession, women had an overall lower unemployment rate than men and became primary or equal breadwinners for the first time. So I guess the pandemic has been no different. COVID has been no different in that around the country, in hospitals, we've got in health clinics, we've got doctors and nurses and PAs and staff stepping up and basically risking their own lives on the front lines, and trying to solve the issue of how do they take care of their communities. So for context, as you said, and this is where Fitz Frames comes in, founded by the very talented Heidi Hartel, empathetic and talented Heidi Hartel, she saw the opportunity we've been talking about on this call that, diverse groups don't just, we create solutions for all, not just a select few. And so Heidi and her team immediately set out to reach out to hospitals, to doctors, to nurses, to medical techs who were on the front lines. And they heard that one of the things that they were most concerned about was protective eye gear. And so from that standpoint, they immediately did a pivot. They got their head of product and head of design involved. And they designed glasses specifically for the medical personnel that would grip, that would hug their face, that would cover their eyebrows, because even your eyebrows can be a place that can gather the particles. And they wanted to just cover them completely, yet be able to do their jobs. And so they completely put their business on the D2C side, I would say almost on hold, and went out to provide PPE to leading hospitals and clinics around the country. So I couldn't be more proud. I would say that they, look, credit where credit is due. It's a diverse team, but I am not sure this would have happened if there had not been a female founder at the helm of that company.
Love to hear that. Noosheen, I'd love to just chat with you for 1 second. If you could take your microphone, make sure you're on. We'll quickly, I've got a quick question for you, quick question for Deepa, then Julie, you're going to take us out. But Noosheen, I'd love to just hear about January.AI. I know a lot of people are interested in what you're doing, and you've raised another a big round recently. We'd love to hear about that.
Sure, yeah. So we're using AI to help people manage their blood sugar. As I mentioned, there are 122 million people in this country who have diabetes or prediabetes. So half of the adult US population has one of those. And so we use sensors like continuous glucose monitors and heart rate monitors and a small step program or app to help people see inside their body. So what they do is basically they do 2 weeks of experimentation, much like you would do with like the Whole30 or elimination diet, but it's very focused on glycemic response. And so then you get insights about what spikes your blood sugar. And then we offer all these interventions about how to avoid those spikes. For example, eating low glycemic load foods. We have, through machine learning, we have figured out not just nutritional labels for all the foods in Yelp, which you don't normally have, but we've also created glycemic load and glycemic index for these foods. So 16 million foods. Today, you only have nutritional labels on groceries and basically chain restaurants. So, so encouraging you to eat lower GL foods, but not just generically, hey, don't eat sugar, we don't do that. So it's very, very, very specific to you and what you're eating, your tastes. That's the power of AI. It can get hyper personalized to you. Fasting is another intervention that we use. Walking is another intervention, but we don't randomly just say, yeah, Shelly, just go for a walk. It's like fish and chips for Shelly, 13 minutes of walking, for Noosheen, 18 minutes of walking, because I'm assuming Shelly is in way better shape than I am. Calorie restriction is another thing we do. And then a very big intervention is fiber, adding fiber to food. I'd say, if I can leave you with one message, fiber, fiber, fiber. So our goal is to really bring joy back to eating and to living, because when people get diagnosed with diabetes or a number of these chronic conditions, they're kind of staring at a blank wall. They get this sheet of paper that says basically, don't do anything you were doing until yesterday. And it's kind of like a death sentence. And by the way, can you drop 25 pounds or 50 pounds? And people just can't do that. They just don't wake up and drop 25 pounds. So we're trying to give them small steps, actionable things they can do where they can actually, we can close the human behavior loop through the sensor, so they can see, oh, I eat this, this is what happens. I eat this, this is what happens. I'll eat more of this, less of this. So hopefully something intelligent. I'm just really passionate about helping people with solutions as opposed to just telling them, I think telling people to lose 50 pounds or just don't eat sugar again, it's kind of like telling a teenager not to have sex, like use abstinence as the way of birth control. That's how I see it. I think it's ridiculous. So I'm very, very happy and eager to do something that can actually help people. And I'm interested in people's feedback to see how it's working for them, to tweak and tweak and tweak the product to make sure it's something that becomes usable for millions of people, not just a few people. You've all heard about these great companies, Livongo, Amada, Vita, Verta, on Duo. All of them put together are helping 750,000 people out of 122 million people. So let's do something a little different. Let's try something new.
I love it.
Awesome.
And Deepa, I really want to just ask you quickly, you are very into or just a huge proponent of being a mentor and mentorship, and would love to just hear your thoughts on that real quickly.
You know, I don't think about mentoring in the traditional way that most people do, which is very prescribed. I think of it more in a community way, where you never know what the help that you give somebody is going to make an impact. And so I'm much more inclusive in my conversations and offering of advice and help. And it's amazing the response that gets, because people always ask me, why are you doing this? I actually had a call with a senior woman investment banker a couple weeks ago, and she said, "You've been so incredibly helpful to me. How can I pay you back?" And I said, "Pay it forward." And I think that's a big part of what mentoring is. What you learn, you teach somebody else, and then have them teach somebody else. And so that circle of mentorship can grow really quickly and effectively.
Beautiful, thank you. Julie, last question for you. Just give us one of your really great pieces of advice for having a good board of directors, an inclusive board of directors.
Well, we heard it very clearly from Deepa and others this morning. You absolutely need diversity on your board. It stops Enron from happening. Groupthink is very bad. You make a decision to recall 3 times faster when you have diversity on your board. We have got to get out of this. I do you a favor by putting you on my board. And, I've had a couple men say this reverse discrimination thing to me. It's like, that's not a thing. You're not owed those board seats. This is a new day. So I just want to say there is no problem with a pipeline. There is a network problem. So get out there and be unabashedly visible, ladies, and say yes to helping each other, just like Stefanie puts all of us on a platform. Thank you, Stefanie, for your leadership today.
Thank you all. You're some of the brightest, most interesting women. I wish we had 3 hours to talk, but we've got to go. Thank you, Susan, for the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Stefanie, Melanie, Julie, Shelly, Michele, Noosheen, and Deepa. I would love to listen to you for hours. I think we all agree. So huge thanks for the impact you are having on female founders. I know Michelle's fund is accepting LPs. I'm a founding LP for Julie's fund, How Women Invest. And if you're interested in funding female-led companies, please reach out to these general partners.